Goedenavond. Good evening, everyone. Anyone who doesn't understand Dutch? Awesome, then we'll do it in English. Welcome to Carbon Stories. Who is a first-timer here? Welcome, thank you for being here. At Carbon Stories we try to shed light on the roads to carbon neutral, carbon negative, climate positive built environment, how to get there and what it demands, what it asks from you people. I welcome you on behalf of KeileCollectief, EABR, Klimaat Academie and Group A's CarbonLab. And tonight we will dive into the EU Taxonomy. Any of you who is an absolute expert in the EU Taxonomy? Michaël Peeters, I hoped you would raise your hand. The keynote speaker, yeah, okay. Then the roles are clear. What we will try to do is answer the question what it is, what it entails, what it means for you, how it affects your daily work, and what the political shifts that was made last night in terms of the promise or the announcement that the rules and regulations will become much simpler, what they will mean for your work and for the actual road towards a circular economy in Europe. We'll start off with a crash course, then we will dive into a discussion with Karmijn van Berg from Municipality of Rotterdam, Dennis Franken from Stebru and Elise van Herwaarden from INREV. Questions from you, obviously, and we'll transport the conversation to the bar at approximately 9 o'clock. My name is Geert Maarsen, I am your humble host. I will try to find you with a microphone if you have any questions or remarks. And we will start off, like every edition at Carbon Stories, with the evil genius behind this all, Willem van Genuchten.
Thank you. Welcome everyone. I always have the honor to give a short introduction to why this subject is a subject tonight, and then the guests actually dive into it much deeper. We from Group A, we have the CarbonLab since 2.5 years, and with this CarbonLab we research how can we make a climate neutral, climate positive, or indeed Paris-proof building sector on a scale that's relevant possible. The first thing we did with our CarbonLab is set up a research group that looked into regulation. Past regulation, current regulation, but mostly upcoming regulation on a global scale, European scale, national and municipal. This is very instrumental in the conversations we have with our clients, with municipalities, to show what you design now actually has to be matching regulation that's upcoming the coming few years. Our processes are quite long. EU taxonomy is definitely part of that. But taxonomy is not only about Paris-proof. However, it does help a lot. What we really want, if you really want to simplify it, we want this, a facade of a building of Group A in Rotterdam built quite some time ago, more than 10 years ago. The concrete facade panels here, the closed concrete facade parts, have a current embodied carbon emission of 185 kilos per square meter. If we do this today, it could be this. It could be only 21 and we could actually store carbon in the facade. This is what we want to drive. The question then is, how does this help big projects? How does this help the city of Rotterdam? And what is the role of EU taxonomy in accelerating these possibilities? If you think of the current or upcoming tender for Rijnhaven Block 1, quite a high rise, quite complex. Can you build it Paris-proof? Unfortunately, no, you cannot. If you build it conventionally, this is more or less the square meter embodied carbon number that you would end up with. If you build it maximum circular, maximum bio-based, 285 kilograms of CO2 per square meter. However, this is the target number which would be Paris-proof. So this raises the question, if you follow EU taxonomy logic, would an investor around 2030 actually invest in this? Quite relevant if you're organizing a tender. The same for Merwevierhavens, the size of the city of Rotterdam, the city center of Rotterdam, huge development that is upcoming. We know you can technically make it Paris-proof for the guidelines of 2030 with the knowledge of today. So by the time You go to 2030, when you end up there, it's probably even more possible than it is now, technically, but also financially. What would EU Taxonomy drive this forward? How could that accelerate? The city of Rotterdam plans to have a Paris-proof plein or Paris-proof tuin, a kind of a Dutch word joke, at Schiehaven Noord. Excuse me. And in this area, it should be the showcase nationally, internationally. How can you really do a Paris-proof urban development? So the question is, how does, if the national debate doesn't necessarily go there, what role can a municipality play? And what role can EU Taxonomy play in favor of a very ambitious municipality when the national government doesn't really deliver? Well, let's find out tonight. Thank you.
And for that we have invited Michaël Peeters, who is assistant professor at TU-Delft and does research to the question how sustainability and technology impact or should impact the value of the built environment. Please give him a very, very big hand. Michaël Peeters.
Oh, wow. So, good evening. Wow, that's very loud. Okay, very good. EU Taxonomy, yeah. As we all know, yesterday we had the Omnibus going on. Omnibus was the simplification from, well, the European Commission, something that would actually, was the goal at least, to have something done about the European Green Deal and all these packages, all these regulations that are there. I'm just going to quickly get out of this one and then really take the PDF. Because, well, what is very important to know is that the EU Green Deal has one goal, that's really to steer capital towards more sustainable investments. So if you're ever stuck when you're reading the regulation, know that it's written to actually steer capital. So it's always an investor's perspective. So that's very important to know. Now the people from Circular, which I have no stocks in or whatever, but they made a really good overview. It's a bit outdated now, but where you can see actually all the regulations that are within the European Green Deal, nicely per sector and per target group and those things. And also by color, you can see how far along is it already implemented, is it voted. And if you click on those, you can freely download this one. You get the latest version of that regulation. So it's very good and it's very useful at least. And what we now see actually with Omnibus is the only thing that has been targeted next to CBAM, which I will explain in a while, is the reporting part. And specifically, so from this whole PDF of regulations, well, this is the one that actually got simplified, this one. So the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive and everything that has to do with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD and CSDD. So it's a bit strange, because the only thing we're actually simplifying is not the rules, it's not like the goals, it's not like what are we going for, it's how we report about them. So let that sink in, because nothing has changed since yesterday. So there's only been a proposal to actually simplify what you need to report. Now, of course, I started calling this morning everybody I know, which is about 3 people. I have a lot of friends too. And I asked them, like, what are you now going to do? And they were all like, yeah, nothing changed, because the goals are still the same. It's only the way we need to report about them, well, that actually changed, and we want to report about them because it's purely marketing. It's really to make us visible. So, well, in a nutshell, everybody was like, yeah, aren't you very down and totally broken over this one? Well, it's still a proposal, that's the first thing, so it will take a few more months. We know Europe, few years maybe, before it gets an approval, if it ever gets an approval. And then it's only the way we report about it that's going to change. So not even the content. Just to give you that introduction, But of course, if there's other visions on this one, oh, I'm happy to discuss and go into that one, because other views are always interesting. Now, EU taxonomy. We see AI did its job here. This image costs about €1,000. And if you really look at the social cost, it's even more. So, but what does the EU taxonomy do? And that's very important to realize, because that's something that's often not known. The only thing the EU taxonomy does is define, if yes or no, an economic activity can be considered sustainable from an investor's point of view. I always point at myself as being the investor because that's the perspective I take. I always look at things from an investment point of view because I have experience with that one. But know that the taxonomy only defines if yes or no, if I'm an investor and I want to invest in an economic activity, whatever that is it sustainable, yes or no? And that's very important. Because if I want to source my capital as an investor on the bigger capital markets, and I want to make sure that I'm doing a green bond to collect money, or I'm an Article 8 or Article 9 fund, which means that I actually want to be green, well, then I have to prove to the ones providing me the money that actually all the proceedings, all the money I get from them, that it's used in a sustainable way. And the way to do that is the EU taxonomy. So, and that's also a bit strange today, because, well, from a regulation point of view, we say, oh yeah, we're not going to make you report anymore, and so on and so on. But then again, if you go to a bank or you go to an investor, it's probably the first question they are going to ask you. Show me the data. Otherwise, you cannot get the money. And that's maybe a problem, because money, it's something most often is liked in business. So what is now the EU taxonomy, or what at least the idea from the legislator still is, by the way, it's really to drive Europe towards climate neutrality in 2050. That's really actually the biggest goal. Whole life carbon zero. And whole life carbon, that really means from getting the raw materials from out of the dirt up until recycling, reusing, reducing, all the being creative with the letter R words at the end of an asset. In case of buildings, that's actually what's being done. And that has to be zero. So embodied and operational carbon has got down to zero or offset in some kind of way, or and we have to pay some kind of fines to get that one. So up on top you see, well, all the goals haven't changed, not one letter. So that's very important to realize. And then they said, okay, let's do, how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to focus on 6 things that actually can make that happen. Climate mitigation, climate adaptation, circular economy, then stuff to do about water and marine resources, pollution preventing, and then biodiversity. That are the 6 themes where we say, okay, if we balance those, then we are going to get somewhere. And then the taxonomy was built, and the taxonomy was built with the idea, okay, actually you should make a substantial contribution to at least one of the 6 environmental objectives. So one of these 6, you should make a substantial contribution. What means I'm really going to focus on this one. At least one. You can do multiple, but at least one. But then, you cannot do no significant harm. You cannot have that impact on that one environmental objective, at the cost, at the expense of one of the 5 others. So you cannot say, okay, I'm really going to reuse all the materials, but biodiversity, I don't care. I just do whatever I need to do, and if then some creatures die, then that's what it is. So you cannot do that. You have to balance things out. This, by the way, the do no significant harm, that's now what is being challenged. One of the things that is maybe written, because I cannot find where it's written, so I read it all over LinkedIn, like, oh yeah, do not significant harm is being get rid of, and so on and so on, but I cannot find it in all the official sources, so probably there's a text I'm missing. But okay, but that's being challenged. Do we still need to do that, or is it enough to make a substantial contribution, which would be a terror? But okay, that's another discussion. Substantial contribution, one of the 6. The other 5, you need to balance them out. And then we have minimal safeguards, where we actually say, which is pretty normal. Don't use child labor, equal pay, all those kind of things, which are hopefully pretty normal. But then again, there's absolute necessity to make that very obvious. And then to actually see the substantial contribution in the do no significant harm, there are technical screening criteria, which are actually often mistaken by this is what we need to do within the project. These are the check the boxes, which is true. You have to check the boxes, but nowhere there's written that that's enough. We also have like a whole bunch of technical regulation, which is far more extensive than what's in EU taxonomy. So don't are like, oh yeah, but here it's written that it's enough. Yeah, we also have the building code, and that's still a bit more elaborative on a few on different stuff. Now, how to keep track of all this? Well, there's been the European Commission has made like a very nice tool, and it's called the EU Taxonomy Navigator. And the EU Taxonomy Navigator, if you just Google it, you will find it. And that's your single source of truth. Let's see if they update him. But up until now, they updated it regularly. And all new criteria gets in there, and you can look it up. And what's the idea? Well, here you can just see whatever. Here you see where I get my images from. Because, yeah, I just copy-paste them. But if you go to the EU Taxonomy Compass, like this, you can actually look for your sector. And within that sector, you have activities, economic activities, and those economic activities, you can challenge them if they're being considered sustainable, yes or no, from an investor's point of view. So that's always very important. It's only, can an investor give you money to do that economic activity in the way you plan to do this? So if you then do real estate, which should pop up because I do only that, well, you see the sector, construction and real estate activities, and then you see a whole bunch of things that are defined economic activities. And how are they defined up until now? Well, people thought about what economic activities have the biggest impact on our target. And those are the ones we are already going to include. And then once upon a time, a long time ago, that's not true, it's like 2019, so there was really the vision to, in the end, include all activities. So that's still something to come, or not, nobody really knows. That's also a bit the uncertainty that's now going on, of course. But for now, it's this one, and then we can, for instance, say, okay, construction of new buildings, you click it, and then you say, you can do contribution to climate mitigation, contribution to climate adaptation, and contribution to the circular economy. 3 of the 6 are defined from an economic activity point of view, where you can make a significant contribution. So you can choose. You don't have to do them all 3 of them, only one, and then of course do no significant harm to the others. So imagine that I choose climate mitigation, which is in the long term actually always the best choice, which I can explain, but takes us a bit too far, so I'm not going to do that. But it's a good idea to do that, mostly from an operational expense point of view. Take it like that. Well, you can read what it is about. You can read the criteria to do a substantial contribution. This is the check the box you should do to make sure that an investor can give you money if the investor wants to invest in a sustainable activity. So it's not that challenging in case of a new build. And then you can check the do no significant harm for the other 5. What do I need to do to make sure that I'm not harming, for instance, water, at the cost of climate mitigation? And that's it. That's the whole EU taxonomy, at least from an economic activity point of view and from a checking the box. For an investor, there's much more, because an investor really has to go and report still, it's still not changed, on how much of my money do I invest in sustainable activities? How much of my portfolio is invested in sustainable activities? How much of my operational expense is within that sustainable activity? And that's the reporting that's now obligated, and where they now say, okay, maybe in the future you don't have to do that anymore. But that doesn't change the fact that to be called sustainable, we need definitions, and EU taxonomy is that guide to the definition. Now, if you're not in real estate, don't worry, we got you covered. Maybe. You can see all the other activities that are in here, and there are quite some. Do know, if you have the feeling like, yeah, but what I'm doing, my economic activity, has some CO2 emission going on, which is significant, yeah, then probably, and you don't find it in taxonomy, you're probably looking at the wrong terms. Sometimes it's a bit tricky to find stuff back. Like for instance, if you're installing like a building management system, then you have to go and look at electronic devices and the manufacturing of electronic devices and sensors, which is then kind of the economic activity you're looking for. So it can be a bit challenging, but in the end you will find what you're looking for. So that's the EU taxonomy navigator. And again, the only goal of this one is to align the definition on what, from an investor's point of view, I'm going to repeat this a few times, from an investor point of view, is being considered sustainable. And that's important. EU taxonomy is the key of all other reportings within the Green Deal area or arena. Because EU taxonomy tells me something about how you do your activities. If you're then in CSRD, so corporate sustainability reporting, how green is you or how sustainable is your company? Well, first thing we are going to ask you is which percentage of activities is aligned with the EU taxonomy? Because that will tell us how do you as a corporate, as a company, use that sustainability? How are you using that taxonomy, and how much of the things you're doing, generating revenue with, are actually being generated in a sustainable way? And that's important, because EU taxonomy and CSRD, the corporate, the companies, will actually go towards the bank or investor or some financial market party, FMPs, where they will ask for money. And SFDR, Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, has not been touched by any omnibus or whatever thing they invented. So that means that everything that needs to get finance still needs that data to actually be able to get the funding. So you can say, oh, EU taxonomy, we don't do that anymore. CSRD, we're not going to do that anymore. That's all fine if you have a lot of money. The moment you say, oh, but I'm going to get money from some financial market party, from some bond, from some obligation, from some, I don't know which financial instrument, they're going to ask you the data. And you have to provide it. Otherwise, those from an SFDR point of view need to disclose that they actually invested in a non-sustainable product, which from a marketing perspective is kind of suicide. So let's not do that. So that's a bit the idea. So, and that's also how everything comes together. And how that EU taxonomy will still define how we look at sustainability and how economic activities are fundable, yes or no. Almost there, don't worry. Again, how do we get those sustainability? We want to steer the capital, and even better, we want to make the sustainable, we is Europe, I don't, we, me and my buddies, all three of them. Well, we're going to steer the market because we want to steer the capital. And what are we trying to do? What is Europe trying to do? Is make the sustainable choice also the financial most interesting choice. And that's why we see all those carbon tax going on, emission trading system, CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism, where we see the green bonds, where we see sustainability linked loans. All those financial instruments all heavily rely on the taxonomy to have those activities funded, yes or no. But going outside of EU taxonomy will be penalized and will become more expensive through time. Using virgin materials, that's no problem at all. As long as you can pay it, you have to do that. Don't do it, but okay, you can do that. But if you use circular materials, well, actually you will see if you do the feasibility calculation, if you do the valuation of that project, of that investment, well, it will be more profitable and more interesting if you use recycled materials. Because we want to push the whole circular economy. And how can we push it? By taxing everything else. That's the goal. That's why you see within the Green Deal all the Critical Raw Materials Act, the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Renewable Energy Directive. All those legislations are there to push you towards what has been defined as sustainable. Is it then more sustainable, yes or no? Big discussion. That's something else. But at least that's what the strategy is. So all those buzzwords you see, I like bonds, CSRD, nature friendly, zero, a lot of zeros going on there. It's really all about steering that capital towards what we want, what is going to be considered sustainable. And that's important, because from an investor's point of view, and if you want to see a grown man cry, just start talking about risk in an investor's perspective, then you see a lot of things going on. People become pale, start crying, run away. And up until yesterday, actually, we had some kind of certainty, because we knew if we had a green bond and we did activities that were taxonomy aligned, we could use the money for the green bond to actually fund those activities. Well, since yesterday, we don't really know anymore, because they pushed the pause button and all those other very cool terms to say, well, we don't really know yet. But then from a risk point of view, that's huge, because an investor today has no framework anymore to say, okay, this is being considered green, so from a fiduciary point of view, from a legislation point of view, I'm doing the right thing. And that's a bit a pity for now. But do know, yeah, you see that words and AI are still not what it has to be, but I'm that lazy and I cannot do Photoshop, so it is what it is. But you get the picture. It's really about de-risking sustainability and sustainability investments. And we need a framework. We need EU taxonomy, CSRD, SFDR, CS-DDD. That's kind of an exception. But we need those to de-risk the investment world so that we can get easier and cheaper capital to do sustainable investments. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure whether everything's clear, but we will find out in a minute, and we will find out by asking to the stage as well for a conversation Sustainability Advisor at de gemeente Rotterdam, Karmijn van den Berg. Give her a big hand. Sustainability Advisor at Stebru, Dennis Franken. And last but not least, ESG Manager at INREV, the European Association for Investors in Non-Listed Real Estate, Elise van Herwaarden. and the chair for Michaël as well. Michaël, let me first start with you.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to start with you. I'm going to start with Elise. Elise, you are ESG manager at INREV, European Association for Investors in Non-Listed Real Estate, which means, and you will get a microphone as well.
Thanks. Which means?
Yeah, which means. What is it? What does your club do?
Well, we're a non-profit association for European investors in non-listed real estate vehicles. Our members work in the real estate investment sector on a large scale. It's mainly institutional investment entities. And they either manage real estate funds or they invest in real estate funds. There's also academic members. And what we as INREV do is help this sector become more transparent, share data insights with them. But my role specifically is to help this sector understand what new sustainability initiatives mean and how they become more sustainable in a very broad sense. But one of my tasks is to clarify what these regulations that Michaël just talked about specifically mean for the non-listed real estate industry in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Two questions about that. How many of your members truly understand what we are talking about tonight? A second question, how important are measures, classification methods such as the EU Taxonomy for your members?
Both really good questions. So we have about 500 corporate members, which means that there's 500 companies that invest in Europe are INREV members. And I'd say that most of them have to understand what we're talking about because they do have to report under SFDR mainly. And as Michaël said, EU Taxonomy alignment.
The question was not if they should understand it, but whether they actually do.
No,
we're among us. We're among friends here, so.
Yeah, no, but a lot of them do because it's big companies. Most of them have lawyers in-house, or they work with lawyers. So maybe they don't know it themselves, but they get advice externally. But they do spend a lot of money on understanding what it means. And then how important it is for them, that differs. So generally speaking, the Netherlands, the Nordics in Europe are very progressive countries, and that also works through in the sense that business is done in a more sustainable way, generally speaking. But what you see is that these regulations are actually really driving sustainability efforts for companies that didn't really feel the need by their local governments or because of their own idealism, for example, to actually become more sustainable, that were only focused on generating revenue and not focused on doing that in a sustainable way. And those had to do it because of SFDR and now CSRD.
Help us understand how this mechanism works.
So let's take an example. Let's say there's a Polish investment manager. Polish investment manager has buildings in the Netherlands, in Germany, in Norway, for example. This Polish investment manager is really happy with sustainability efforts for the buildings in the Netherlands, but maybe not so much in Norway and in Germany. And they now have to report, because of SFDR, on the sustainability performance of their underlying investments. Well, they find out, because they have to get all the CO2 emission data, they find out that those performances are not so great. And they report this to their investors, for example. Their investors ask, okay, our money has to be invested in a sustainable way. So please do something about it, because we want that our money contributes to a sustainable economy.
Because all the money wants to be invested sustainably, or is that the assumption and the correct assumption, Michaël?
Well, maybe if I can add to that one, in our view, it's also de-risking. So it's really looking at, okay, what's going to be a stranded asset? Which assets are going to compete on a market with other sustainable real estate or assets, real estate objects? And are we going to get that sold then? And are we going to get that sold at the current valuation, yes or no? And actually that transformation into more sustainable assets, well, is also necessary to actually avoid that and not come into conflicts like in France, where, for instance, you cannot do a transaction anymore on an asset that doesn't have a label F. We had the same thing in the Netherlands with the label C on office buildings. So you want to avoid that's going to be an issue. And that risk, yeah, that's for an investor everything. And if you are a Polish company, well, you maybe not even know the Netherlands. So you need those data, you need that information to actually base your decision upon.
So, if to get this clear for us, EU Taxonomy helps the risk analysts into getting a sense of which investments might be stranded assets in 10, 15 or 20 years in country A, B or C?
Well, not exactly. Not exactly, because there's a whole bunch of other analysis that you need to do, but it is a part, and at least it's a beginning.
Okay.
Because you also have like the carbon risk monitor you can do, and other calculations that you can do that are more technical from a nature point of view. But at least it gives you the certainty that if you want to make a sustainable investment and avoid all other costs and future regulations and those things, yeah, if you're taxonomy aligned, at least you know you can avoid those.
Yeah. Karmijn van den Berg, you're a sustainability advisor at the gemeente Rotterdam. What does that mean?
Actually, I'm a program manager, sustainable urban development. Since 5 years, we have a program at the municipality that takes care of sustainability within urban developments. We do different things, so we share knowledge. We do that with colleagues, but also with people within the city. We develop tools to make life easier for our colleagues, and finally, we are also having a group of advisors advising at the
and you decide who can and cannot invest in the city of Rotterdam because they are not sustainable enough, or is it not that simple?
No, it's not that
Why
simple.
not? Why not? Why doesn't it work like that?
Because the municipality of Rotterdam doesn't own that much of the grounds within the city. So,
okay.
How it mostly works is that if investors, developers want to build something, they already own the place, and they ask the municipality if we can change something on the permits.
Yeah, the bestemmingsplan.
Yeah, bestemmingsplan. I'm not sure how it's called in English.
We can throw an occasional Dutch word, but
yeah.
so, and there's nothing else you can do. They cannot be touched by you and your colleagues. Then.
Sure, we can talk.
Okay.
We make nota van uitgangspunten. I'm not sure the English word for it, but we try to talk with each other what the development should be, and we make a kind of agreement on that. Sometimes
is it safe to assume or to state that the work you and your colleagues do is an attempt to make Rotterdam now and in the future a little bit more sustainable?
Yes.
To what extent does EU Taxonomy help you in this matter, or does it complicate what you are doing?
Actually, I think it's helpful because the goals for both local and national are very high. So we want to be Paris-proof, for example, but current laws, current building regulations are far below this level. So there's a big gap between that, and EU Taxonomy is something that can help to decrease the gap.
Yeah.
It stimulates
to be less bad.
Yeah, it helps to stimulate developers to think about it.
Okay. Okay. Dennis, Stebru is a developer and a builder combined, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Can you say something about what the perspective we're talking about tonight means for the company you are working for?
Well, I think the EU Taxonomy is a very clear and practical tool to, like Michaël said, to kind of get a point of view, an investor's point of view, on the demands that property or real estate needs to have in order to be considered a sustainable and economic activity. Yeah.
Do you remember the moment when you first heard of it and it sort of got into, how many people work at Stebru?
120.
Yeah. How many people know what the EU Taxonomy is at Stebru? You and 3 other colleagues?
No, it's actually a little more than that. So,
okay. Can you share with us how something like EU Taxonomy gets into a company with this size, and what it happens when people are confronted with something extra to do, something that not necessarily makes their life easier, I think?
Yeah, that's true. Well, first of all, I think it's important that it's a very widespread company in terms of specialism. We're a contractor and a developer also. The majority of our colleagues are working on construction for the contracting company. Mainly people that are working outside on the construction sites as well.
And they couldn't care less.
Yeah, let's just put it that way.
Okay, yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's fair. They already have a lot on their heads. But when it comes to the development part of the company, the more corporate side of the company, I think a lot of people understand the value of EU Taxonomy, because at last we want to sell our projects to investors or a variety of different clients. Investors being a very important client. So I think in order to stay alive in the future, we need to analyze what our clients need.
Is it easier with a classification method like this to get money, or has it become more difficult?
Me personally, I haven't experienced a very concrete way that it has created more money for us in a way. I think right now we're really in a stage of exploring the definition of EU Taxonomy. We're exploring with clients what they are willing to do or willing to invest more when we can provide in sustainable activity aligned with EU Taxonomy. So it's very much more the exploration of what it,
Michaël, there are a lot of worries about the competitiveness of Europe, right? In the press release yesterday, the word competitiveness was important. You could read it like 100 times. And it seems to me that there is a sort of tegenstelling, contradiction, thank you, between competitiveness and sustainability. Is this a correct assumption?
Well, maybe from an assumption point of view, yes, but in reality, no. Yes, but
thank you for your very brief answer.
Let me elaborate on that one. Let me elaborate on that one. So, what actually is competitiveness is when you compare your internal market with the external market. So we're looking at Europe as being the internal market, and we look at United States and China and India and all those markets as being external. And when Europe talks about competitiveness, then it's really like, okay, we have to do something about our deficit. So we have to import and export, and that needs to balance out sometimes, because we want to get as much money in from a geospatial perspective, and we want to give less money out, because then we become a richer region, and because we are a richer region, we can invest in infrastructure, we can attract bigger companies and all those things. So it is important. Now, what we see from the outside markets, like America, India, they all have something that we don't have, and that's raw materials. And what Europe actually needs to do is become self-reliant from an energy point of view, from a material point of view. That's why we have the Green Deal. The big scheme, 2050 and beyond, is actually that we become, from a geopolitical point of view, independent from our outside market. That's actually the goal. So in the short term, sustainability might seem as overregulated and difficult and more expensive, and it will cost money and so on and so on. But of course, once, for instance, and let's take energy, because that's always very kind of tangible. Don't touch it, but it's kind of tangible. Well, don't touch electricity. Now energy is very expensive, and you see, oh, are we going to buy gas from Putin, or are we going to go with the LPG and so on and so on? Once we do the investments in renewable energy and we become fully self-reliant, then actually our energy prices will drop. Because our energy prices will drop, it will become much more interesting to produce stuff within Europe, which then again gives us a competitive advantage towards the rest of the world, because we can actually produce cheaper, and from that we can sell cheaper. And well, it's still the golden law, you buy cheap.
I want to challenge this sort of,
Yeah?
This is dangerous because I'm going to talk about your assumptions, but
Yeah.
I get the impression that your assumption is that we are still aiming for this green utopian future, and that yesterday hasn't changed that much in...
Not at all. There's not one, but there's not one target that has been changed. The only thing that we changed is, oh, you don't have to report on it anymore. Don't collect the data, we trust you. That's actually what has been said. And that's kind of naive.
This is, and I want to challenge this assumption. But this is a, you could say this is a sort of technical, technically this is correct, but it's a symbolic gesture, right? It's politics. So you could see it as a political, it might not be a U-turn, but it is a shift in where you say you want to go, right?
Well, we just, from a European Commission point of view, you have to see that you don't go bankrupt during the transition. And that's what this is. This is really to reassure everyone that Europe has not gone crazy, that we still know that competitiveness is important, that companies are important, that production capacity is important, that jobs are important, that income is important, and to reassure everybody that Europe still realizes that. Well, we kind of say, oh, but we make it 35% more easier on you for a small business and 25% more easier for you for a big company. What does that even mean? Does that really
Elise,
mean that you can skip like
how many
1 in
people
4
did you call
letters?
this morning?
Sorry?
How many people? Elise, how many? No, wait, no. I
Oh,
wanna,
you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm also curious. And who? No, don't do that.
Well, there was one person I really wanted to call, and that's our public affairs director, but he was on holiday.
What does the political turmoil, not only yesterday, but in the last couple of months regarding this subject, do to not only the way people within investment offices talk about this, but what they are actually planning, and are the strategies being changed as we speak as a result of the political turmoil?
Good question, and yes, the strategies are being changed, but that's mainly, I think, the public strategies. So I think there's two clear examples that I've heard about last week, especially since it became clear what the US direction specifically was going to be. But one of those was that a big American investor that invests largely in Europe has their, or an investment manager that has their like investment prospectus, it's called. That's where they write out their whole investment strategy, and that you can pin them down to if you invest in their funds. So they were actually deleting all the sustainability-related plans and strategic goals from that document. But then, to attract capital from Europe, they were actually attaching a side letter, which is also legally binding, but just not publicly available, where they said, these are actually our efforts. It's just not something that we want to be available online in the American context, because we don't know what the consequences will be.
You don't want to be cancelled by Trump. Yeah. So
exactly.
So, but what does this? What does this story, this example, tell you? That they still want to become more sustainable, contribute to a more sustainable world, and that they probably already invested a lot of money into going that direction, and that they will keep doing that for now, at least. I'm not sure on the long term what it will mean. So, and they are the scenario they are calculating with is that Michaël is right. Europe is still heading in this direction on the long run.
Yes. Yeah.
And the political turmoil and the announcements like yesterday do not change anything.
Well, I
about
mean,
that.
this information being publicly available until now did, of course, inspire and help others into also striving for those goals. So I think kind of removing this public in a lot of areas from the public debate does, of course, have very negative impact. And I think, indeed, reporting is just a tool of disclosing what you're already doing in the background.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a way of showing others how it's done and what you can strive for from a very idealistic point of view. And for some companies, it's also their driving force, because they only do this because they can show it to the outside world, look for capital, and then spend that money into that direction that they've already set out.
Yeah, Dennis, it's not a secret that a lot of companies are sort of very eager to learn from government what rules and regulations will be there for the next couple of years, that the government has been sort of a very unreliable partner in a number of ways. To what extent is this political turmoil ik wou zeggen onveilig, sort of, does it, to what extent does it make your work harder in predicting where you should get? I can imagine that you think, oh, waar ben ik aan toe?
Yeah, you're right. The predictability is very difficult at the moment. But I think the main goal that is unchanged. So we're like they said, we're going to keep going around the whole omnibus debate. I sat down with our director, our CEO, and I confronted him about it. Like, what are we going to do? Because there's a big chance that we're going to fall out of the scope. So, reporting-wise and in terms of administration, it's going to be pretty easy. But
which means you don't have to do all the complex reporting anymore.
As it stands now, there's a big chance. Yes. But he said to me, we're just going to keep going because the goal doesn't change. Because
this costs you money and time, right? So why this decision? Did he explain, elaborate on this?
Like I said, the goal doesn't change. The goal of our clients doesn't change. And the goal of Europe in general, it doesn't change anything. It just changes the reporting side. So we still have to adapt to that proposed new economy.
Karmijn, talking about political turmoil on both European and national and a local level, you as working for the municipality have been confronted with zwalkend beleid. Is that? Sorry, I'm throwing in a lot of Dutch terms. But with unclarity, uncertainty about where we might go on the long run.
Yes.
What does that mean for you, your work, but also the projects in the city of Rotterdam, such as the Rijnhaven we saw?
Yeah, so we try to move on and keep our goals in mind. I think the most important thing we did last year was making an agreement with the developers within the city, mainly organized in the POR, Platform Ontwikkelaars Rotterdam. They already made an agreement on building more houses because of the shortage of housing, and we made an action plan on sustainable building with them. So these houses are also made sustainable. The goal in this action plan is to be Paris proof and together, so it's comply or explain. So or you're Paris proof or you have to explain why you're not. This is what we agreed all together, and so we are now trying to learn and to practice to share knowledge with each other together to try to get steps, and you hear it from them. They still want it, so continuing together is the way to go. Even though the national government wants to slow us down, even Europe is hesitating. It's still we are almost out of our CO2 budget for Paris Proof. So within 2 years, we have to change our building practice. So why wait?
Okay. I had a lot of questions about political U-turns being made, but from you I get the assumption that we are still in a straight line towards the green utopian future, Michaël. But I can imagine it dazzles you a little bit, so I would like to open up the floor for questions, remarks, critical contributions whatsoever, doubts, existential crisis, please. You raise your hand at the words existential crisis. Is that a coincidence or no?
It's a coincidence, yes. I have a question to Michaël, 2 questions actually. One is about you mentioned the reporting at company level, the reporting at economical activity level. But what about the asset being here, the building itself? I mean, at the end, if an investor is buying, you're not buying the company, you're not buying an activity, you're buying a building or renting a building. What about that level of reporting? Second one, when you say do significant contribution in one of them, for example, climate mitigation, how quantified is this? Are there benchmarks or?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first off, your technical questions, that's other regulation. Energy Performance Building Directive, EPBD, is still there. EPBD is still there. Nothing has changed there. Bouwcode is still there. So that's really the technical part. And that's something you also have to comply with. Well, primary, you have to comply with that one. And secondary, taxonomy is only stating, is it considered sustainable from an investment point of view? So nothing changes there, even that's a regulation that becomes stricter every 2 to 3 years. All those labels and energy targets and CO2 emissions. So that's already there. All the technical stuff is there. Nothing has changed. Keep on going. Clear pathway to 2040, 2045. And that's still going on. And then coming back to taxonomy, well, actually, if you go and look at climate mitigation in a new building, what actually is being said there is that you have to do 10%, 10%, it's now 10% better than the EPC norm that's within national legislation. So actually because taxonomy is a regulation, so that means it applies for the whole of Europe. So you see a lot of, you have to do better than national regulation. So in case of, for instance, I don't know, the Netherlands, you can say, okay, you have to build 100 kilowatt hours per square meter primary energy. If you want to be sustainable from an investment point of view, well, then you have to do 10% better. So you have to build at 90 kilowatt hours per square meter primary energy. So that's linked in that way. And then you have a lot of, a lot of criteria being set like that. So that doesn't go away at all. So the whole PDF
it's not an answer to your question, right?
Is still there.
The energy part I got, but you talked about materials, which is the big elephant in the room, the embodied carbon. Are there any benchmarks there? Energy, we know that.
Well, yes, there are. No, they're not official. So yes, there are. There's a lot of standards, which is then the problem because there are a lot of standards. But we have the Climate Act, which actually defines that you should do an LCA, life cycle assessment of all your buildings starting 2028. And actually what the goal is to have an internal benchmarking from out of those projects. And that will then be some kind of self-regulating benchmark from out of the practice. But of course, if you have tools like one-click LCA, or you look at carbon alt control, something like that, all those guys if those LCA softwares, the carbon accounting softwares, well, they're all based on some norms already. But like that's the official norm, the one to use. That's not there yet, but that will happen. Yeah, that's not being touched.
Question over here as well.
Yes. Our national government is a little bit lacking to yes, to change the European law into national law.
Yeah.
They do everything for years to dive, to jump over, to traineren, delaying, everything. How big, and then at the end they do something, because you have 2 years to implement for all the laws. At the end, you can hold accountable by the judge to bring to the consumers, bring you to court or activist groups or whatever. How big is the chance that it will happen coming years and that builders will end up in jail?
Oh.
Or Mona Keizer, or...
You're asking me or the other? Because, well, we can do a poll. Let's make it an exit poll. Well, that he will get into jail because of this. That's then the question. Okay. Well, he will not go to jail. I don't know, but it's not criminal law yet. Well, that was the case in CSRD. That was the big issue. Everybody was really afraid because then it became criminal law, and as a CEO or board member, you could actually face charges and go to jail. But that's been handled even before it got published. So that lobby was very powerful. Now, translating a directive into a regulation, because, well, you have to know you have European regulation, and European regulation, that's the regulation. That's for the whole of Europe the same thing. CSRD is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So a directive is to say we're going that way, and all member states should translate this in their own national regulation. Which, well, in the Netherlands was very, very late. And in Germany, they never translated into national regulation, and they're actually, well, they're now at the good side, because they don't face this problem. But yeah, there's a big issue. That's really the uncertainty that's there. Because, yeah, imagine you have national regulation that actually tells you have to report within 2 years. And then you have Europe that says, oh yeah, but we're going to put everything on hold so you don't have to regulate, you don't have to report. Well, that hold, that doesn't stop national regulation. So that just keeps on going. So unless somebody, Wilders in this case, should then also stop and change that national regulation, it's a mess. That's really the idea, because imagine that Europe says, okay, you can do the stop, but then the Kamer in the Netherlands says, no, you cannot stop. Yeah, then nobody knows what then will happen, because then actually regulation is there and you need to report.
A mess, I quote, and nobody knows what will happen. That sort of describes the situation where we are right now, right? Karmijn, you were smiling when he was talking about the national government slowing, I think your exact words, slowing us down. Yes. What are your thoughts on this? And
what are my thoughts? Well, on slowing down, you mean, or?
Well, that the government is sort of deliberately slowing these processes down and creating uncertainty.
Yeah, it's annoying. Yeah, I think if we want, you know, with it's not only with carbon, but with all the kind of regulations from the last year's stikstof, and water will be another thing that's coming up. With all the things we are behind Europe, and every time what you are saying. We are finding all kind of gaps and holes to continue. The complicated thing is that there are always a lot of interest, and in this case, it's also within the municipality that we have to build houses. There are a lot of people looking for a house. If we sell the ground, we cannot. We have to earn money. We cannot put money into it. So it's all very hard to. These interests also needs to get room, and finding a sustainable future and having these interests as well included is a very complicated field, and this is not only for us in the municipality, but also the national government is the struggle. And yeah, what we should do on it, I don't know, but at least we try to just continue and at least try to learn together how we can reach these goals like Paris Proof, find out what is EU taxonomy, what can we do with it. Yeah, this is the only thing at the moment we can do.
Yeah. Willem? Saskia, you're a little bit closer, then I'll go to you, Willem.
Sorry. Thank you for a very insightful lecture so far. My question, actually my ear keeps on ringing around this notion of sustainability, because actually it seems that we're now literally sustaining a particular system. I would like to hear a little bit more on this, the other side. You've mentioned the investor and capital. I was wondering if you see new models of investment or capital. Is that field changing in a way that could give us something to be hopeful about?
Elise?
If there's new investment models being developed, you mean?
Yeah, well, we keep on hearing a lot about the taxonomy, and I somehow translate that as sort of value creation, the meerwaardecreatie that we hear a lot about in our field at the moment. But I'm wondering, I'm not so informed in the other side. Let's say if there are, I'm just going to say something extremely naive, but let's say ethical investors, or that people from the financial side.
Well, is this a reaction to ethical investors, Michaël? Or?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Elise, so in what way is the existential? Let's use the existential crisis, the ethical, moral shifts, maybe ethical, moral U-turn being made in the boardrooms of investment companies.
I guess they're mainly made in like boardrooms of newly constructed companies. So of course there's new and hopeful examples of companies that really emerge with the aim to create a better world, let's say. But the difficulty with investment companies is that their primary goal, or at least like on par with becoming more sustainable, will be to make a profit or at least a return, because they exist so that money can.
You're saying
keep
it's a
its value.
difficulty. This is your branch, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, but I mean.
And
yeah,
to what extent do these two align, sustainability and profitability?
Yeah, so that highly depends. So maybe to clarify, I also started working in this sector because I wanted to make the built environment more sustainable. I've studied architecture, and I really thought the financial system is one of the systems that kind of creates the built environment, together with a lot of other systems. It's a system in itself, it's part of other systems. Money can be a driver, but that really depends on if the people that spend that money want to drive the money in a sustainable direction. And there are definitely companies that do that, but it should always be a part of a broader strategy that can actually generate
You were sort of
revenue.
hoping for a collective moral, ethical shift, right? Or
No, it was fairly an open question. No judgment, but because I'm reading into the post-growth city, and I'm trying to understand the notion of circularity from a planetary perspective, and reading heavily into the World Economic Forum and where things are heading. And I see some hopeful aspects, but I personally believe that we're in a massive systemic change. So I was clearly really opening up to the questions like, what are the changes from the notion of capital, if we understand capital that is now accumulating, and still searching for gravity, which we called architecture. For 40%, it's still investing in, our profession. So that comes with a challenge.
Yeah, to add a little bit on that, but I've also really been searching for examples that were like very different than what we know. I'm not doing this course on regenerative business now, and I was hoping so much that there would actually be like real estate construction, development, design firms that would be examples in this course on how you can actually do regenerative business within our sector. But it's difficult. It's really difficult. So I hope that somebody has an answer. Yeah, that would be great.
Questions, yeah. Willem, did you want to make a remark still, or?
Thanks for giving me hope tonight, by the way, because it seems like there's just a little ripple in the water, no more. I have a very practical question. When we speak with as designers, with clients, no one says sustainability is stupid. No one says we don't want to work on this. They want to see the Excel sheet. So I'm curious if someone on the stage can enlighten me on where do the embodied carbon heavy materials, at what point in time, I hope soon, when do they get overtaken in competitiveness with low embodied carbon materials? Does EU Taxonomy help in this matter?
Michaël, you were nodding. Does this
Oh,
mean
yeah,
you have the question ready, the answer ready for us?
It's a tick, yeah. No, but no, for sure. Well, an exact date is difficult, but we do see that if nothing gets postponed, like CBAM is now getting postponed for 2 years, which is Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, on CO2 tax, kind of. But yeah, well, you kind of have to see that 2035 will be a different world on that perspective, because then we do have the obligation of doing the life cycle analysis, we do have the carbon taxes in place, we do have the obligation, we should have then do the obligation to do the carbon accounting, and we do also do the valuation, which will actually impact the way we look at financial value, but also include non-financial terms. So my hunch would be 2030, 2035 will be really a transition period, and starting 2035 up until 2040, 2045, we will actually see significant impact. That's at least the prognosis on that one. Yeah.
Dennis, can you say something about sort of, is there a scenario within your company that you sort of work out and that you can explain or say something about this is the moment when we will no longer start use this material, or this will be a tipping point, relating to the question Willem just asked?
Well, the short answer is if it's going to cost money. If we start to, if we're going to have to start to pay for CO2 emissions or you know, heavy CO2 embedded materials, then yeah, automatically we're going to adapt to that. So yeah, if it's going to cost money and it's going to be more expensive to build with conventional building materials, I think that's going to play a major role.
Okay. Question in the back. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I have not. I have a question, a small question, but the first one is about creating money. What Saskia was starting about. At the moment, we have a big project, and we have also clients. And the first thing I start with the start of the project, I start asking them, "What about sustainability?" And they say, "Yeah, everyone, we want it, but we don't have money." That's the first thing. Then I skip the ethical and the moral discussion, and I go directly to EU Taxonomy. Why? Because in the end they have to sell their product and their asset in 5 years at the market. Already we have investors that are, because they think on the long term, 25, 50 years, they want to have an Article 8 or 9.
Can you say something about what your role is?
I am architect, partner with Orange Architects. Give an example for Jonas, for instance, the building we made. We had a big fight with the developer, Amvest, because it ran out like 5 million over budget. But Amvest Core Fund, they were happy, super happy, because they got a really cheap project with a high investment rate. So it already works. And a lot of people in companies don't understand, because it's so complex, what the value of the money is. But it's already running. I believe investors look way ahead, and they already see they only want sustainable projects long term. My question was, how does it work with housing corporations? Because they are not on the 40 million.
think it's, well, for me personally, I think housing corporations are going to be a big challenge because it's so focused on money right now and the whole sustainable economy and investing large amounts of money in sustainable projects. And, you know, social housing corporations are only, you know, focused, I mean, fair enough, to affordable housing. So what I see is their main focus point is energy, because that contributes to the affordability of their housing mainly. But that's all. I mean, it's a start. But when it comes to the higher standards of sustainability, yeah, I think it's going to be a big challenge for housing corporations.
My question, are they compliable to the European taxonomy?
Oh,
somehow.
No, they're
I don't have knowledge on that. But
no, they're exempt, so they don't. Well, it depends a bit, but no, they're exempt. They should not report, they should not comply. So municipalities and all other instances too, they're all exempt from that, having to report and having to comply. But that doesn't mean they don't and they shouldn't. So that's a bit the idea. So most housing corporations are really up and running with taxonomy, really know the value of sustainability, and are very scared to end up with a stranded portfolio. So they really need to align their investment strategy, and well, most of them I know are really up and running with the sustainability idea and going even further than what is necessary.
Some skeptical people. You're one of them, I think.
Yeah, okay, a lot of almost all clients, big clients, even big clients. I don't call names, but they don't, on the working floor, they don't understand how it works. So we have a big project, and from BAM, the CEO from BAM is calling us for a big project we're working on. Can it be more sustainable? We said it already from the beginning on. He has to give his directive to his own people in his own company at the moment. I think it will change over time, but this is the situation at the moment. That the CEO, and he's not calling because he has a good holiday in the forest. It's about money, so it's already up.
And can you explain what his motivation is and why he or she, not only BAM but other big companies, has not succeeded in getting this to the floor?
It's too complex. You saw the sheets. It's even in the big architectural offices, there are some directors that know everything about it, but the other one not. It's so complex in a lot of, and all the companies. It's changing, because 1 year ago, if you said EU taxonomy, nobody knew, so you had to explain. Sorry, what do you say? Now we have this already. This event about it. It's boring in its sense, but it's super powerful. It's how the change is made, because this is creating money. It's giving money to sustainability.
Yeah, and I think, if I can quickly answer, but I think here is a big difference between the financial sector, so institutional investments, and the not-for-profit housing sector, for example, that then mainly have to face national regulation. So of course, if the EPBD, I think there was a regulation that you were referring to before, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, that has to be transposed into national regulation. If that is not transposed onto national regulation, the building decree doesn't change, and then housing corporations don't really have to build in a sustainable way. So there's no need for them, so they don't hire an ESG manager, they don't get internal knowledge. So then the change will probably happen in the future, but just a bit slower. Whereas these financial institutions that then already have to report, they have to show all their numbers, figures, they have to pay fines if they don't do anything, then of course there's this financial incentive that makes them do stuff. So that probably causes a bit of difference of pace, let's say, between these different entities.
Karmijn, you wanted to add?
Yeah, the only thing we do as a municipality is make the prestatieafspraken. I'm not sure how this is called in English, but we make agreements with these corporations, and they're about how many new houses they build, but also sometimes about sustainability. So in this way, we can help or at least stimulate them to go a little bit higher than the national laws. But yeah, it's hard.
But also the financial market will self-regulate in a part. Today it's on balance financing and you have all those mechanisms, but also that money comes from somewhere.
Yeah,
So in the end, capital will become that much more expensive if you don't do it in a sustainable way, that there's no other way to finance the project than do it in a sustainable way. So that's just how that works. That's how the market, but it takes time, of course. That's clear.
I would like to sort of nuance the broad optimism we're sort of getting into now. Elise, when we had a pre-interview, you said, well, something is changing. It has been sort of widely accepted that this is the way we are going, but you see a sort of development that it is becoming, it's turning back into sort of the sustainability hobby that it was like 10 or 15 years ago. How does this statement relate to sort of the optimism Michaël is explaining here?
Yeah, so there's actually a term for this, greenlash, which I kind of captures it all, I think. But that's okay. So I think the trend that I've seen, at least in my career, which is not that long, but was that indeed sustainability was something for idealists, people that really wanted the world to become a better place than it is now, instead of it getting worse. Then at a certain point, this kind of started to translate into regulations and into things that had to be done. Then of course it became a very different profession, and it brought very different things with it. Before it was something that you could pioneer with and that you could kind of position yourself with as being new and innovative and doing a good job. Now it's something that you cannot not do, so you have to do it. And if you don't do it, then you're doing something wrong. But now that's kind of, how do you say that? That kind of regulation is becoming less and less strict. So it's the topic, it feels like it's kind of being dropped by a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So then indeed the people that started working in this field before, that might not be a bit tired of it, because they had to work with all these boring regulations and they had to work with all these like very, very tough and dry topics as compared to actually making buildings more sustainable. I think some of them have maybe phased out of the industry, some maybe lost their energy a bit, or some were just taken over by lawyers and people that knew how to work with these regulations. So I don't know, yeah, it would be great, of course, if there would be a new wave of like fresh, energetic people that, yeah, or maybe people that could sort of re-energize themselves to start working on this from their idealistic perspective again, because there's not any drive, any external drive anymore.
Okay. Michaël, this is a point of disagreement for you guys,
well, not
right?
really disagree, but when I look, so at TU-Delft we train architects and management of the built environment, so the next professionals, and for them it's really a way of living. It's really that way.
For them you mean the new students?
The students.
Mm-hmm.
It's, well, we used to be sustainable because we had to. It was cool and it was hip and it was trendy for some people, not always. In financial terms, you could better not say that you were sustainable, because that was a kind of a no-go. But now, for companies, it's even not possible to attract, or it's becoming harder to attract people, new talent, because you are not doing the sustainable thing. People are really intrinsically motivated to do sustainable things, and if you as a company say no, I'm not going to do this anymore, that will become less and less the attractive. You won't get the human capital. It's really embedded in society.
Yeah, but the difficulty that we're facing now is that maybe not in Europe. I think in Europe you're right, and especially in the Netherlands. I mean, I feel it myself too. But then in the US, if you actually are fined if you publish your DEI policy on your website, then it becomes a very different field. Yeah,
for sure, and that's also, well, you're completely right there, and that tension becomes very, very large, and in a transition period that will be very difficult. We also see that a lot of people are going abroad to be able to explore themselves and do a lot of other things, like oil drilling, which is a hobby. Well, after the transition period, when you really see that sustainability is to sustain and to be a sustainable business, then well, things will shift again. Also, don't forget that just before January 24, just before Trump came into office, well, doing DEI and all those other policies was still done. So this is also really a bump in the road and some pages in history where actually in 100 years we will laugh about, but it will take another 100 years to really see the joke of it.
So this is the scope that optimism needs to sort of fully find its way, Michaël, 100 years.
Well, it's not really optimism. You can actually prove that that's the case.
Okay.
So it's a bit more than that. It's also no belief. It's not like some God is coming down and save us all. I hope so for that to happen, but yeah, you never know. No, it's really solid business. It's the mechanics. It's the way the world works. So, and there's a transition period, and then yeah. But specifically for Europe, because we don't have any raw materials, we don't have energy supply. Well, that's the only way. Otherwise, yeah, we're kind of doomed. So that's not optimistic.
Okay. You had a question, remark?
Yeah, I have a question because I'm quite interested. You're saying that let's say the green sustainable mentality is now embedded in society and sort of. But yesterday's omnibus package actually contradicts that because, in my opinion, reporting creates transparency and also accountability. And if you remove this and you're only dependent on SFDR, which applies to the financial markets and financial players, I mean, they're dominantly driven by profit. How can you say that there are still sufficient instruments in place to drive this sustainable transition?
Again, the goals long term didn't change. There's a lot of regulation going on, and I do agree, reporting creates transparency and creates that extra drive, which is now being skipped, but it's being skipped mostly to give the idea towards industry, we care. Europe cares, and we care about you being profitable. That's the only way, because actually all those companies that are now doing the transition are creating net zero buildings, and all the buzzwords will report on them. It's their biggest marketing effort they will do. So it will just not be standardized reporting, but they will report on that one for sure. That's what I would do. So it's embedded. At least we think about it and we consider it. The youth, so the generation, 2 generations before me already, really thinks about it as a reflex. You don't have to tell them anymore, and that's a good evolution, in my opinion. Yeah. Even without the reporting and having the data. But data will come. Yeah, you have to. That's that easy.
It's 9 o'clock. Let's do 2 or 3 last questions and then wrap it up.
I have a question related to which extent the local governments, like municipalities in the Netherlands, have the power to kind of deviate from their contracts on building the certain amount of homes they signed to build until 2030. To which extent municipalities in the Netherlands are kind of allowed or can find more creative workarounds to create new homes within the existing built environment, rather than building fully new housing, for example, as an initiative. And the second option is that to which extent municipalities like Rotterdam are reconsidering urban plans that have been started developing 10 years ago and today provide building envelopes that are completely going against all target goals, like towers of 200 meters height. So how much change on these kind of previous commitments, legally, let's say, or contracts-wise, municipalities can deviate?
How much room do you have, Karmijn?
The municipality as a whole has a lot of room on it, but the question is if I have a lot of room on it. For first of all, you say, can you, for example, transform buildings, as I understand your question? instead of rebuilding, demolishing it completely and rebuilding it. What mostly now happens is that buildings are demolished because we want to make more houses and build higher. And unfortunately, this is more important at the moment than taking care of the carbon emissions. So, for example, for renovating. And this is also the thing you say with the larger projects, the high-rise towers. Most of these plans are already existing for 10, 15 years, and if there is a political will to stop this, then everything can be stopped. But mostly there is not this will. So this is where we, at the end, where we are depending on. Sure, I can make sure we are bringing it onto the table, but yeah.
We will vote next year, March. We might vote differently, and we might change the skyline of the city of Rotterdam. Two last questions, over there and over there.
I'm curious, for me it seems the conversation remains on a fairly abstract level, but I sense that at the end it focuses, it tailors to the architectural skill. Could you elaborate on how you see that the EU Taxonomy also provides tools for actually enlarging this and stretching it to area development, where I sense that actually the biggest impact can be made? So practically not kind of calculating assets of buildings, but building sustainable GHGs or MKBA's, if you want.
Oh, wow. Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think I wrote already 26 letters to explain this to European Commission and EFRAG and all legislative bodies, to explain that you have to stop looking at economic activities, you have to stop seeing sustainability as a responsibility of one asset within a larger system. You can only achieve sustainability, and I can also prove that one. I'm a mathematician from a background, so you can only get to sustainability if you look at it on an area development, and I always, or an area level, and I always give the example of if I put solar panels on my roof, and my neighbor puts a windmill, and the windmill actually generates shade on my solar panels. Both from a taxonomy point of view are sustainable investments, but in practice, none of them will work. So I even published on this one, so I totally agree. And also actually the city of Rotterdam and Den Haag also are really considering and looking at, okay, how can we, from a permit point of view and from a legislative point of view, actually go and look more at the area level and create what we then call collaborative games, to actually achieve that real sustainability and not just sustainability on paper. So yeah, totally agree. It's really, really, really urgent and necessary. And I kind of hoped that sector-specific standards would actually bring that one. But yeah, as they're probably not going to be created even, I will write letter number 27 just to ask them again to consider this one. But huge debate on that one also within Delft. So totally agree.
Last questions of tonight.
Yeah, sorry, it's not a question, it's a remark. So I really felt the urge to align with the positive energy of the professor. I really understood that you wanted to have a proper discussion, but I really think that it's very important for us, this group, I think we are here about 100 people, really consider locus of control. So if we create this positive ripple, we create massive positive waves. So don't underestimate our own responsibility and what we can make happen. And I, for example, very much appreciate what the Municipality of Rotterdam is doing, like Paris Proof, comply or explain. Already that type of conversation, explaining, exchanging knowledge, it will push so much forward. So, I mean, we need not to get depressed. I'm also getting depressed from the news, but we should not do that. We should be empowered and really keep on pushing forward. So I really felt the urge. I'm sorry.
Amazing concluding remarks. Thank you so much. Let's use that vibe to get ourselves to the bar. I have some concluding remarks by Saskia, director of EABR. But before I give her the floor, I would like to give a hand to Elise van Herwaarden, Dennis Franken, Karmijn van den Berg, and Michaël Peeters. Give him a big hand. Saskia van Stijn.
I'm going to take 3 minutes of your time, and I would start with an invitation. This is totally ad hoc, but I'm now so inspired by the speakers that I would like to somehow set out a pedagogical line of sorts around these questions through the lens of EABR. I don't know how I'll finance it, but I'll find a way. So whoever wants to think along, let's make this happen, because I truly feel that you are introducing directions, how things can be different. But besides professionals, we are also citizens. And I want to take you by the hand by one of our collaborative partners called House Europe. And this is a project where we aim to activate our European citizenship when it comes to signing 1 million signatures in order to start change from within, as you mentioned. I couldn't have had a better little pop-up for my short presentation. Because on average, when we demolish and rebuild, press up the rent 30%, which increases, of course, especially for the social fabric, in particular neighborhood, leading to displacement and leading to what we, of course, know as gentrification. So, approximately 1.5 million square meters, actually, of existing space could be reused. Now, to give you an idea of how large that is, that's all of Berlin, all of Athens, all of Bucharest, and all of Paris combined. So that could house 50 million people. I'm just going to go very, very shortly, because I already mentioned that our profession, and we've heard it today, is deeply related to a capital investment. So how can we somehow get out of this deadlock of commodification and land speculation and the financialization, you know, form follows finance by now, and break through that loop. And together, if there's 1 million signatures in all different countries of the European Union, we can actually provide legislation so that we can make sure that we keep the carbon stored, that we keep our fabric to a certain extent the way it is, and that should not stagnate innovation and development, obviously, but if we start to work from the existing, I'm 100% sure that we can meet the goals and the taxonomies that we've been talking about. So have a look, inform yourself. There's beautiful documentaries. You can disagree, you can agree, but of course I'm hoping you will sign. Let's meet each other at the bar. Thanks to the speakers. Thanks to the host, Geert Maers. Do you want the mic back? He doesn't want the mic back, but please give it up for him and the speakers.